All right, we are back. Now, for our next story, this is going to be a major discussion and what is debatably the biggest animation news that came out last week. Now, this is actually related to Inside Out 2. Considering that we've talked about it plenty on this podcast, especially with how it performed at the box office and how it did better and better and better, down to the point of becoming the highest grossing animated feature of all time, even beating out Frozen 2 and the 2019 Lion King remake. However, there was a new report that just came out, and let's just say there is a lot, and I do mean a lot, to discuss. Now, I could be wrong, but don't be surprised if suddenly I would have to go and take a break in the middle of it to go and actually discuss more right afterwards. So there's going to be plenty to go and look into. So with that said, let us now go and discuss about this IGN article. Specifically, the one that is called Inside Out 2 was the hit Pixar needed, but the laid-off employees who crunched on it are still hurting, which was written by Alex Steadman. Now, I'll be saying this a few times, but if you guys haven't read this article, it's going to be a tough read, but I highly recommend that you go and read this. Now, it is worth noting, by the way, that everything that is stated here are legally and technically considered to be allegations. There is no 100% confirmation if this is what's actually happening at Pixar. But in this article here, they talked to 10 former employees at Pixar about their experience of working at the studio and especially working on Inside Out 2 and how it came out as a massive hit and how they personally feel about it after the experience of what's been going on, and not to mention what's it like to work at Pixar Animation Studios nowadays. And to make a long story short of it, and the best way to go and describe it, well, there's a very good chance that for those of you listening and watching this, you have seen Inside Out 2, so you probably do recall the climax of the movie when Riley was about to have a massive panic attack, and in her head, anxiety is causing this massive tornado, like really going out of control, where all the other emotions are having a hard time to try to get in and to like actually talk to anxiety. Well, unfortunately, that seems to be what's been happening at Pixar, especially during the last few months of the production of Inside Out 2, where there was some serious pressure that was put onto the employees and to the artists and animators, that they really were framed in a position where the movie they were making was, in their words, a life or death situation. Like, they pretty much were working under the pressure that if Inside Out 2 is not a massive hit, then Pixar will become nothing. Pixar will shut down if Inside Out 2 wasn't a big hit. Now, I'm just going to go and state this right now that, in my opinion, I don't think that would have happened anyways. I don't like, even if Inside Out 2 would turn out to be a massive box office bomb, I don't think it would shut down. Like, yeah, sure, they'll have to reassess their business strategies and what kind of films they would go and produce, but I don't think Pixar would immediately cease to exist if Inside Out 2 wasn't a massive hit. But for the animators who were working on that film, it absolutely felt that way, down to the point where overtime was actually very common at the studio. Like, of course they would have to go and work far more hours than they would regularly do. They even stated that they would have to work 7 days a week in order to create this movie and try to make it the best that it can ever be. So they were really under that intense pressure and working overtime. And you could probably imagine the psychological scars that would come with it. And they even said in this article that there are some animators where even if they no longer work at Pixar, even if they're finished with Inside Out 2, they actually still feel that. It's even stated here, so reading from my source on IGN, it states, some go as far as to believe Pixar would fall apart if Inside Out 2 wasn't a runaway success. It was seen by many employees as a life or death situation for the studio, as I just stated. That was the pressure felt by everybody, one source said. We need this movie to succeed because we won't have a studio otherwise. And that is the pressure that everybody felt the whole time. The whole time. Even now, I think people are gone, still feeling that pressure like, oh my God, we did it. We did it. So, yeah, you can imagine that by working on this movie, they need some time to recover. Even like, you know, even though like it's already established that Inside Out 2 is the biggest animated feature in history, some animators still need a lot more time, maybe even a few years, just to go and process the experience of trying to go and make that. So in some ways, some people could go and say that with Inside Out 2, or at least the production of it, we're kind of seeing a little bit of the same thing like what happened or what's been revealed last year with the production of Across the Spider-Verse, where the animators have been overworked, the morale was very low at the studio, and, you know, there's always this constant pressure on them where psychologically it's hard to go and recover from that. So with that said, some people would go and see those parallels and they wonder about the creative leader at Pixar, Pete Docter. Is Pete Docter someone like Phil Lord, who's kind of like this tyrant when making the movie and would demand way too much from the animators to the point that they don't care about their well-being and they would just go and like really mess things up during production? You know, like is Pete Docter as bad as Phil Lord? Well, the answer to that is no, actually. In fact, this article actually states that very few people would have anything negative to say about Pete Docter. They wouldn't necessarily consider him to be the problem. But they do explain that there is another problem that is related to Pete Docter. So let me just go and find that little thing over here. Yeah, so it actually states on this one, or wait, is it this one? Oh, no. It's, yeah, it's not over here. Yeah, it's actually in this section. And by the way, it is actually worth noting an additional thing that the animators have actually revealed about Inside Out 2 is that Pete Docter's role in the film is actually much bigger than you would expect. He's not just the executive producer and the creative consultant and stuff like that, but he is also the co-director, where the pressure was so big at Pixar that even Pete had to go and step in and also add a bit of his directorial touch onto the picture. So with that said, let me just go and read you this part here. Many of the sources IGN spoke to generally don't have particularly negative feelings towards Docter. It's well known that after all these years and a proven track record, he knows what he's doing. But it's also indicative of what some sources say is a godlike worship of the man in charge, a holdover from the days of ousted Chief Creative Officer John Lasseter. One source says the studio leans on Docter to an unhealthy degree, and it's partially what leads to a situation like the crunch on Inside Out 2. You cannot do anything without Pete, literally nothing, one former employee says, and that creates a bottleneck. For many, it's a symbol of Pixar holding fast to an internal culture that is stubbornly set in its ways. with an aversion to bringing on new directors and voices. One source cites a period of time between 2020 and the release of Lightyear where the studio was more open to bringing in producers and creatives from outside its typical ranks, as well as greener filmmakers. Mann made his directorial debut on Inside Out 2, beginning development during that more experimental period in 2020. So what they're pretty much saying is that Pete Docter is not the problem here. It's just the creative strategies that is happening at Pixar, especially nowadays, where, as they say, the creative process is seriously bottlenecked. And that actually brings up another massive problem when it comes to Pixar, is how they're playing it way too safe and that they're not willing to take any form of creative risks, down to the point where they refuse to go and bring in any new creative voices and new directors to go and make some films for them so that they can add like a fresh new take to the Pixar films and stuff like that. Which honestly could also explain some of the recent creative decisions, such as having Andrew Stanton be the director of Toy Story 5, considering that Andrew Stanton is someone who has a lot of experience with Pixar. In fact, he is one of the Pixar veterans, so of course they would go and hand over the directorial duties to him instead of someone who is like fresh at Pixar, kind of like what they did with Toy Story 4 with Josh Cooley. But the biggest reason why they have this mentality of playing it safe is actually because of Lightyear and the fact that it was a massive failure. And from there, it also brings up kind of like a sub problem to the main problem of having its creative process be bottlenecked. And that is the fact that Pixar does not understand why Lightyear failed. Or at the very least, they did not learn the right lessons as to why Lightyear failed. Now, I will admit, I actually like Lightyear. I don't think it's as good as the Toy Story movies, but I enjoy it for what it is. But at the same time, oh, excuse me, folks. That's my lunch that wants to make a bit of a comeback. But anyways, as I was saying, I do understand why some parts did not work with Lightyear and how that led to the movie's downfall. And from there, the thing is that when the executives saw that Lightyear was a failure, they did not take the right lessons. And one of these is the fact that, unfortunately, well, they want to limit their creative process and they want to try to play it a bit safe. Considering that with Lightyear, say what you will about the film, but you gotta admire the way that it tries to take risks. The ways that it wants to experiment and wants to do things that are way different than what they typically do with the Toy Story films. At the very least, they did try. But with that said, though, not only do they not want to take risk after what happened with Lightyear, but also, oddly enough, the executives somehow believe that the reason why Lightyear failed is because of the fact that there is that gay kiss, or technically the lesbian kiss, that happened for 1 second. Apparently because of the conservative outroar, because Republicans were being so weird with that gay kiss that it kind of triggers their disorder and just like freak out over that little thing. Apparently executives believe that that seems to be the cause, and it really turned them off from having any gay characters in a Pixar movie ever again. In fact, they became so paranoid, or you know what, I'm just gonna go and flat out say it, they became so homophobic that they tried to make sure that with Inside Out 2, they wanted to be so that with Riley, she doesn't seem gay whatsoever. Like, they want to make sure that when you see Riley, they put in additional effort, more so than necessary, to make sure that Riley does not seem or is perceived as gay. In fact, let me go and read you that one part over here. It's actually with this, in which it states, the apparent hesitance to touch on LGBTQ plus themes storylines in particular affected Inside Out 2's development, according to several of the sources. Multiple people recall hearing about continuous notes to make Riley, the main character of both Inside Out movies, come across as less gay, leading to numerous edits that ramped up around September of 2023 after the resolution of the Writers Guild of America strike. Sources describe rumors that there was a special care put into making the relationship between Riley and Val, a supporting character introduced in Inside Out 2, seem as platonic as possible, even requiring edits to the lighting and tone of certain scenes to remove any trace of romantic chemistry. One source described it as just doing a lot of extra work to make sure that no one would potentially see them as not straight. And I'm just, okay, let me just go and comment this on this right now, that this is absolutely ridiculous. This is nothing more but just homophobic paranoia. And I know with the Disney executives, they always never wanted any gay characters. In fact, like you probably remember before Lightyear came out, there was the controversy when it was exposed that they want to try to undermine a lot of the gay elements in certain films. Like they tried to do that with Nimona while Blue Sky was still alive, and they tried to do that with Lightyear. But because of the backlash that they received from that, they then added back that lesbian kiss scene. And with that, honestly, there's really no other way to describe it than delusional paranoia. You know, like this is just freaking out over a non-existent issue. Because I could tell you, like there are many other examples out there that prove those Pixar executives wrong. That the little gay kiss right there, or the lesbian kiss, that is not the reason why Lightyear failed. And a great example of that, funny enough, is another Pixar movie, Luca. Now, I know technically none of the characters in there are gay. But I mean, how many comments, how many posts, how many videos have you seen where people have discussed about the theory that Luca and Alberto might be gay? Like, people have been going on and on and on about the potential relationship of the two, and if there is a possibility that they might become a couple in the future. Now, again, there's no confirmation. It is not canon whatsoever if they are gay, that they are gay or whatever, but it didn't stop people from making those theories and to make those speculations. And I'll just say now, in my personal opinion, I just gotta say, why the fridge are you looking at Luca and Alberto when Urkele obviously is the absolute gay one? I don't know about you guys, but I feel like my gaydar is a lot more triggered on him more so than on Luca and Alberto. You cannot explain the existence of Urkele without mentioning any gay factor onto him. But anyways, with that said, even though there are a lot of those speculations about which character is gay or not on Luca, that didn't stop the film to become a massive success. That didn't stop the film to collect such a massive fan base and for people to really enjoy it just about as much as any of the other Pixar films. And if that's not enough proof, then why don't you take a look at Nimona, a movie that is unapologetically gay. One of the main characters is gay, in fact, where at the end of the film, they actually do a full-on kiss scene. Like, you actually have two gay characters kissing right in front of the camera, and it's actually a long, passionate kiss on top of that. And not only that, but then you also have the other main character, Nimona, who is an obvious metaphor for non-binary individuals and for transgender people. And yet, that movie has been nothing but a big hit. It is massively successful on Netflix. It is still highly watched on the platform, and also like highly praised by critics, like really gathering raving reviews. and also receiving a whole bunch of nominations for Best Animated Feature, including an Oscar. So in that regards, you can make all the theories and all the explanations as to why Lightyear didn't work, but you factually cannot say that it's because of that gay kiss. So that is another major problem that Pixar has right now. They need to go and reevaluate why is it that Lightyear failed. Because I can tell you right now, being experimental and including gay characters in there is not the problem. But then, with all that said, there is also what is possibly the biggest problem of them all. Now, you got this part here that does go more into detail as to, the work environment of making Inside Out 2 and the massive stress that they went onto it. And even mentioning that, unfortunately, a lot of those problems are still continuing with the next Pixar movie, Elio, which is set to come out next year. But the worst of them all is actually regarding what happens when they get laid off. Like, again, keep in mind that this interview or this IGN article, they discussed with 10 animators at Pixar who ended up getting laid off from their job. So they no longer work at Pixar anymore. And and one thing that they massively emphasize is the consequences as to what happens when you get fired from Pixar. And this reveals what I believe, in my opinion, is the biggest problem with the studio right now, at least in terms of their business and how they operate the studio right now. And that is the fact that Pixar Animation Studios is non-union. They are not affiliated with the Animation Guild, and that the animators working at Pixar are actually non-union. And this was actually a deliberate choice. This was actually something that, they've planned out since the very beginning. Like way back when Pixar moved from Richmond to their current location at Emeryville, Steve Jobs picked that location in particular because he and the other big heads at the time, like Ed Catmull and John Lasseter, they wanted to avoid the union as much as possible. Because again, back then, the Animation Guild was only focused on the animation studios in the Los Angeles area. Meanwhile, Emeryville is located right next to San Francisco, much up north in California. So from there, they wanted to make sure and maintain that Pixar remains a non-union studio so they don't have to work with the burden of dealing with the Animation Guild and the limitations that they would go and set onto the executives of what they can do with the animators and stuff like that. But anyways, going back to Pixar, the thing is that even though the place is non-union, what they do offer to their animators is very much like if you are a part of the union. Now, the pay, admittedly, is not great at Pixar, but you do get a lot of benefits when working at the studio. You actually do get some great health care, and especially among all things, it's actually, what was it again? Oh yes, the bonuses. Now, the bonuses are meant to be a way to go and compensate for the little salary that the animators would go and get. Whenever a Pixar movie would go and become a massive hit, then the animators who would work on that particular film would end up receiving a massive bonus. And not just that, but also there are some other factors as well, including the bonus would get bigger if the budget goes under. Like if the money that they spent on the film does go under budget, then that will be placed onto the bonuses that the animators would get. However, there is a massive catch to that. The big catch about it is that if you want to get those bonuses, then you got to be sure that you still work at Pixar until the very end of that production and when that movie gets released in theaters and has that box office result. Now, there is also other factors that do play into the bonuses that, yeah, you will be paid massively if the movie becomes as big of a hit, just like with what happened with Inside Out 2. But if you are under the circumstances that if it ends up being something like Elemental that is only a modest hit, then at that point the bonuses are relatively low. Or if there are those occasions that if the movie becomes a flop, such as Lightyear or The Good Dinosaur back in 2015, then those animators do not get a bonus whatsoever. And keep in mind that when it comes to Emeryville, that is not a cheap place to live. It is actually rather expensive to be living at Emeryville. So a lot of these animators are very dependent on those bonuses in order to go and make a living in that particular area. Now, oh boy, I don't think I do have a lot of time, but I'm just going to go and take a quick break right now. And when I do come back, I will go and explain more about the problems and the controversies that is happening within Pixar. And I will go and explain the biggest problem as to why Pixar is non-union. And of course, after all that, I will be asking your thoughts on the whole situation. So stay tuned, sit tight. There will be more to discuss about the whole problems with Pixar. So sit tight. All right, welcome back. So let us continue with our discussion with Pixar. So I've already established some of the great benefits that you do get with Pixar, like the healthcare and the bonus and all that kind of stuff. But here is the biggest problem with the fact that they are non-union. You see, the biggest issue is that if you get laid off, and by the way, pardon my language, but you're not screwed. You are fucked. You are just absolutely and unequivocally fucked. Almost for life, even. Because when you're out of Pixar, you lose everything. Just about everything. Not only do you no longer get your salary, but on top of that, you lose your entire access to Pixar, like down to the point you cannot go into the studio at all because the management says that, oh, it's going to make things awkward for the animators, and you cannot even go back in order to go and get your stuff or even to get whatever work that you have done so that you can also include it onto your portfolio. There's also the fact that you no longer have your health care, like any health benefits you would get from that is completely gone, which is pretty ironic because being fired from Pixar after working on Inside Out 2 means that you also lose your therapist, which honestly, those people would absolutely need after that experience. But then also, you lose your bonus. Like, you do not get your bonus whatsoever that people absolutely need in order to keep on living in Emeryville. They need those bonuses, and they've been looking forward to it. In fact, many of those animators, that was the one thing that really keeps them going. Even when their morale is absolutely low, even when they feel like they're just absolutely overworked, they can look upon the bonus in order to feel like their entire work is worth it. But unfortunately, despite doing all that work, they would lose their bonus entirely. And sadly, that is what happened when many of those animators got laid off. And this is especially the case with what happened even this year or even recently, by the way, considering that, here, let me just go and double check on one thing. Just to see if this actually happened this year or, oh, no, it also happened last year. But, now, the reason why this is a massive problem, because recently you may recall that Disney has really been on a binge of just really laying off thousands of their employees all across the entire company, like not just at the Walt Disney Company, but even in several of their divisions as well, including Pixar. And yes, Pixar did get massively hit where they would get chunks of employees getting laid off. And not to mention, even this year, there was an instance where about 14% of all the people working at Pixar did end up getting laid off. Now, there are some notable people that during that time did get laid off, unfortunately. And of course, the most notable ones being Angus MacLane, the longtime Pixar veteran who was also the director of Lightyear. And then you also got Galen Sussman, who was a longtime producer and a Pixar veteran as well, that ended up getting let go from the company. But however, when it comes to those people who did get laid off, previously, reports stated that those who did get affected were only those who were working on the shows for Disney Plus. When Disney decided that they were going to go and change up their strategy so that they could go and focus a lot more on theatrically released films instead of making all these like short stories or these TV shows for Disney Plus and stuff like that, you know, for stuff like Win or Lose, or for those little shorts like Cars on the Road and stuff like that. It would only, like, they promised that only those people would be affected. But in reality, that is not actually the case. And there were some animators who were working on movies such as Elio and Inside Out 2 that unfortunately got laid off. So sadly, yes, there were some people who did animate for Inside Out 2. They got screwed over and they got laid off during the middle of production, which means that they no longer have access to those bonuses, or they did not receive the massive bonus. Like, you could imagine that the people who did work at Pixar, they would receive such an incredible bonus because of how successful that it became. But unfortunately, those who did get laid off, they will never see that. And they are right now at the point where they're kind of like reassessing their life of like, what can they do next? And there are some animators that they even stated that, you know, they're trying to find different strategies of what to do, or even relocate themselves from Emeryville. They, you know, it's already becoming too expensive to go and work there, so they would probably have to move out and find another place, like maybe move to Los Angeles or maybe move to Vancouver in order to keep working as an animator. So overall, when it comes to this entire article, it's absolutely shocking, and I would even say heartbreaking to go and read all this. And keep in mind, like I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I highly recommend that you go and read this article to go and take a look at what has been going on within Pixar. But yeah, there's no other way to describe this other than it is shocking. And the worst part about it is, again, this is an issue that is still ongoing. They're still continuing this problem with Elio, and that those people are kind of going through the same thing right now. So at that point, there are a lot of issues that are currently happening with Pixar. And I mean, it's not just like one easy fix or like just do this one thing in order to go and resolve the issue. Oh, excuse me, folks. I don't know what the fridge is happening with my digestive system. But there's a lot that needs to be fixed. And unfortunately, it's going to be a very tough battle, especially when the executives who are gatekeeping these problems right now, there's like an increasing disconnect between those people and with the people working at Pixar, considering that actually there is one little moment near the end of the article that actually does describe it best. Let me see if I can go and find it right over here. But yeah, I think it's I think it's like right over here. There was no one from HR or anything supporting us or guiding us. It was all a mixed messaging, and that was super frustrating and emotional, and just adding to the whole stress of all of it. And this is also discussing about when these animators were fired. In the meantime, the former employees were left to watch as Inside Out 2 became a runaway global success. One person there at the time says the studio felt out of touch with how they celebrated its blockbuster box office with those those who worked on it were on the way out. Another laid off employee recalls getting asked by industry colleagues about their potential bonus given Inside Out 2's now hit status, only to relay that they won't be getting it at all. Okay, that's not what I was looking for, actually. Let's see. I know there is one part that honestly, like, it's exactly what I was no, this is it. Okay, this is what I was talking about. Okay, I think the biggest feeling that I heard around the studio before the layoffs and now even post layoffs, talking to people who are still there, is everybody feels like the executives are really just acting in a fear-based way. Another adds. Everything is to preserve their own power in their own jobs. So I think morale is really low because people no longer trust that they're being led with their best interests at heart. So yeah, honestly, like, I'm just gonna go and say this right now. Like, I know that I don't have the solution to all the problems here. Like, the best that I could do is just go and express my opinions, to go and discuss about this. And again, these are all allegations, technically, but it is worth discussing about this. So, to go and express my opinion, like, with all of these problems that they do have, like, one of the major ones, there needs to be a reconnection between the executives and the creatives. And this is especially on the executives' part, where they need to go and, like, chill out, man. They need to go and actually calm things down, where they have to go and find a way to gain back the trust to their employees. Because right now, like, there is a clear separation between these two, and the more and the longer that this separation is, the more that it will be hurting Pixar, and it will be hurting their movies as well, both critically and financially. So there needs to be a reconnection, or executives would have to find a way to win back the trust of their own employees. And also, that would mean that they would have to go and, like, try to break through their fears. And this is why I mentioned that they need to go and reassess why is it that Lightyear failed. Because a lot of what they thought about is not true at all. It's not the fact that there was that little gay kiss there. In fact, that was actually during one of the best parts of Lightyear, may I say. And it's not the fact that they would go and take creative risks. Like that, and honestly, that's one thing that they especially have to do. They need to be encouraged to go and keep trying more risks. You know, that's what put Pixar on top of the animation industry in the first place. Like, yeah, there is a chance that if they keep on experimenting, they might end up making another Lightyear. But there is also the chance that they can go and make another Inside Out 2, or that they can go and make another one of their masterpieces like the Toy Story films, or Up, or Inside Out, or WALL-E, or anything like that. So honestly, that is another thing that they need to try to go and do, is that they need to be encouraged to take risks. They need to be open to include more diverse characters who could be gay or anything like that. And not to mention, like, out of all the things, like, if they're like, and this is the one that I personally feel like is a massive emergency, Pixar needs a safety net. They need to provide a safety net to the employees that would potentially get laid off, especially nowadays when you got major studios such as Disney, Warner Brothers, and even Paramount, and so much more, when they've been in the mood of just laying off thousands of workers one by one with one major batch at a time. They need to go and find a way to actually include a safety net to their employees. And if Pixar is not going to have the courage to go and do that, then that's when the Animation Guild needs to step in. That's when Pixar absolutely needs a union. And honestly, it is so incredibly stupid that Pixar is still trying to run as a non-union facility. For God's sakes, you're one of the biggest animation studios in the world that is owned by a massive corporation like Disney, and yet you still want to act as if you're like some small indie studio that, oh, I can't afford to have unionized animators. I can't afford to go and follow these rules. Yes, you can. I mean, for God's sakes, you put in like $200 million on your budgets. I mean, you can actually go and afford to have a union to your animators, all right? Grow up, Pixar. Get unionized. That is a major thing that they need to go and do above everything. It's either they need to craft a serious safety net to ensure that their animators are going to be okay after they get laid off. And this could possibly mean like giving them the bonuses as well. That, or the Animation Guild would have to step in, and that they need to do something. And I feel like right now, with how things are at Pixar allegedly, and at Disney, and with Hollywood in general, I think there needs to be a moment that the animators need to rally up. They need to team up with the Animation Guild and have it be recognized by the union. So yeah, honestly, that is my entire piece and my thoughts on this entire situation. So yeah, as expected, there was really a lot to say about this, but yeah, honestly, as you know, I love Inside Out 2. It's still one of my favorite movies this year, but it is, much like what we have heard with Across the Spider-Verse last year, it is very disappointing and kind of heartbreaking to hear that this has been going on, even at a place like Pixar. All right, so with that said now, I would like to go and pass this on to the chat wall, and I'm going to ask you all, what do you all think? Because I know I've said an absolute mouthful, and I'm sure you guys have a lot to say as well. So let me know what you think. Let's see. The production of Inside Out 2 is basically Across the Spider-Verse and Sausage Party all over again. I feel bad for the layoffs for the animators and going overtime. And I think Pixar should be unionized with the Animation Guild. Also, don't blame that kiss scene to why Lightyear flopped. Blame it on Disney Plus with Luca, Soul, and Turning Red being on Disney Plus, and those other factors Disney had throughout the years. Oh yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of problems, and I know that it is a very controversial decision that, over time, when you do look back at it, maybe that might not be the best idea. I understand, it was the pandemic, but nowadays it's oh boy, you're having a real tough time trying to recover from that, aren't you, Pixar? So, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of these issues going on. Anyways, don't get me wrong, I love Inside Out 2. It's my favorite animated film this year next to Transformers 1. But just like Spider-Verse, the quality of the movie does not excuse the treatment they have to endure. I really hope this attitude changes and the animators get treated much, much better in their next projects. Also, theory of Urkelay being gay. Does that mean that he and his minions, Chicho and Guido, were in a polycule? If so, good for them. Yeah, I'm just gonna say it. Yeah, I think so. I mean, you look at those three. I mean, you got Urkelay, who's like the dommy daddy, and then you got the other two that are just his subs. I'm just saying. Especially there was even that one scene where Urkelay is being fed this giant sandwich, and it's oh, come on. That is just clear queer coding right there. But anyways, while Inside Out 2 is still a phenomenal sequel in my opinion, heck, it's in my top 10 Pixar films, I really do feel bad for the animators, and honestly, at the end of the day, does it matter if Riley is LGBTQ+ or not? This is just down to the point I put more on the blame of those anti-woke idiots than anyone at Pixar. Also, I hope things don't get worse during the awards season, where if the wild robot dominates, people will be such hypocrites where they'll diss Inside Out 2 after praising it. Yeah, well, I don't know. We'll take it one at a time on that. Award season won't be until much, much later. But still, though, I mean, you could still love Inside Out 2 and, call out the problems that are happening with the studio. It's very, the best way to approach this is how people have been approaching Spider-Verse. I mean, you could still love the movie, you could still praise it for being a masterpiece, but you could still absolutely condemn the way the animators have been treated, and especially condemn Phil Lord and Chris Miller for the kind of toxic work environment that they have been enabling throughout their entire career. So let's see what other comments would there be. So, this isn't nearly as bad as Spider-Verse, but still highly stressful. Lightyear didn't fail because of wokeness, it failed because it was hard to figure out. Also, make Riley less gay? Boy, that was a fail. Riley comes across as having a crush on Val. I don't ship it because Val is 18, but I could see how one can easily interpret it as her being bi. Hell, the Cars movie has more gay and bi-ness. I hope Pixar can be unionized. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you cannot stop the internet from making their own theories as to who could possibly be gay or not. Like, it's gonna happen, rather if you like it or not. Anyways, yeah, this is definitely Disney's fault in this case. I really do feel sorry for everyone who didn't get their bonuses. I know Pixar actually worked hard making this modern classic than the Disney exclusives. Hell, I do know someone who was laid off at Pixar as well, and we were emotional about it. I honestly do hope Pixar will end up getting unionized soon and once again doing some risks again. I know they are better than this. Now it makes me hate John Lasseter even more, hearing not wanting, and suddenly the comment stopped. All right. You know, that's one of the downsides when it comes to some of the Twitch chats, is that there is a limited number of characters that they could go and put in. Anyways, let's see what other comments are there. I don't have much to say about this. I never thought there would come a day when Pixar became one of the few controversial studios this year. I'm even feeling anxious trying to comprehend what's being said, and it feels complicated to know what's currently happening. I feel like I feel like any independent idea is no longer safe. Say tell you the truth though. If it ever happens, I'd say make this a great part 2. After this could make a great part 2 after your Sony editorial. Just saying. I don't know what is worse of recent years. You know, that could be an idea. I mean, we'll see how things will go later on. I mean, we'll take the time to see like some of the outcomes with what's been happening with the Animation Guild, because I know right now with the Animation Guild, they are still in talks with the AMPTP in order to go and provide a new deal. So we'll see with how that can go and if they're going to take any steps with what is happening with Pixar. All right, let's see what other comments would there be. All right. This is really sad, yet an important read. I'm really happy Inside Out 2 beat out the Lion King remake, but at what cost? I still do enjoy the movie, believe me, but I condemn the actions the executives did to make the animators' jobs miserable. I shouldn't be too surprised since Toy Story 2 did so years ago, but still very disappointing. The executives really effed them hard with how they're treating animators. That's why animators are still fighting for their pay and treatment with the Animation Guild. Yeah, honestly, I think this is one of those things that we need to start reevaluating what happened at Pixar, especially with that decision with Toy Story 2. Like, a lot of people would say that it was quite an admirable story with that production, and like the movie turned out to still be like an amazing feature. But still though, like, maybe that wasn't the best approach. Maybe that wasn't the best practice. And yeah, I can imagine that the animators were left pretty scarred with what happened. Like, now that you look back at it with what happened with Toy Story 2 and what John Lasseter made those people go through, like, yeah, maybe it might not be a good thing, even if Toy Story 2 turned out to be amazing. All right, let's see what else we got here. I think I'll go with this one. I was going to watch Inside Out 2 when it hits on Disney Plus on Wednesday, but after hearing this news, I don't think I'm planning on watching it now. I feel the same way that I felt like with the production of Across the Spider-Verse. I have nothing against the actual movie, but with the way it was made, I feel so bad that the movie's success came at the cost of animators' mental health. My thoughts and prayers go out to all the animators that were affected by the whole situation. All right, I think I'm going to read one more comment, and then we're going to go and take a break so we can recollect ourselves after going through all that, and then we'll move on to the next story. Anyways, this is so shocking of the fact Disney and Pixar have just been messed up for screwing over animators and artists with the same thing with the whole Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse problem. I wish them luck that they will get their needs and wants. Disney is facing this problem at the same time as the Club 33 lawsuit right now. I don't want Pixar is not going to be a controversial studio as Skydance Animation. So yeah, I think with all that said, it is really unfortunate to hear the allegations of what's been happening at Pixar, but I definitely do wish the best of luck to those animators who did get laid off at Pixar. And also, I do wish the best of luck for the people who are currently working at Pixar that hopefully the working conditions can get better.